She was a beautiful and driven single mom.
Always knew where she wanted to go, what she wanted out of life.
He was a handsome contractor working hard to support his children.
He's suave, he's charming, and best of all, he himself is a single parent.
And when these two kindred spirits hooked up, what started as a fling quickly morphed into a full-fledged romance.
Next thing you know, they were living together. She was pregnant, they were married. It was quick.
But a bizarre phone call on a cool November evening would turn their lives upside down.
Was she kidnapped and abducted? Was she grabbed off the street? Did somebody just simply want to rob her?
But as the theories mounted, so too did the mystery. And the ensuing investigation would have all the twists and turns of a real-life spy novel.
We're talking about real potential for international intrigue. Access to top secret information, potential espionage.
It was very frustrating, and it's also very scary. I mean, what if, something happens to me?
November 11th, 1994. It's a quiet Friday evening in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Inglewood. Inside his parents' home on Hazel Street, 8-year-old Marcus Singleton is asleep in the living room when the sound of his baby brother crying jolts him awake.
Marcus wakes up thinking, what? What the heck? How come no one's tending to the little baby? He looks around the house.
Mom!
There isn't a parent at home.
Marcus's stepdad, Andre, is attending the football game of his oldest son, Andre Jr. But Marcus's mother, Marie, should be home. With the baby still crying, a confused Marcus begins to panic. Just then, the phone rings.
Hello?
On the other end of the line is Marcus's stepfather, Andre Jackson.
Hello, Marcus. Let me speak to your mother.
No, she's not here.
What do you mean she's not there? Where is she?
Concerned for the safety of his wife and children, Andre races home.
Stay in the car, Andre.
He arrives to find Marie's car is missing from the driveway.
Andre was worried. It's one thing for her to leave for a couple hours, but she left Marcus home with the baby. That doesn't make sense. There's something wrong here.
Marie. Marie.
With Marie nowhere to be found, Andre phones friends and relatives, but none of them have any idea where Marie might be.
Now it's getting a little scary. Andre decides, well, you know what? Now it's time to make a 911 call. And he reports that his wife is, in fact, missing.
I'd like to file a missing persons report. Okay, who's missing? Wife, her name is Marie Jackson. I went on to my son's football game, and when I came back from the football game, she had checked.
What started out as a typical day for the Jackson family has turned into a nightmare. But as police converge on the residence, not even the most seasoned officer could imagine the journey they were about to embark on. One that would take them far beyond the cozy confines of this quiet Inglewood home. One beset on all sides by mystery, scandal, and rumors that someone in the Jackson family was in fact a spy.
This could go way in that direction. Something involving international intrigue and potential espionage.
It was a mystery. I was constantly calling the detective, finding out what's going on. When is this going to come to an end?
Marie Singleton grew up in Philadelphia surrounded by a strong, loving family. Both whip-smart and beautiful, Marie excelled in the classroom and easily made friends outside of it.
She was very bubbly, very excited about things, very strong-willed, always knew where she wanted to go, what she wanted out of life.
She was an extremely strong personality, a person that had great depth and insight.
After graduating from college in 1983, Marie landed a position with a respected federal agency.
Marie had a job with the Department of Defense, clerical job, a staff job. She was incredibly intelligent.
But Marie also had another, even more important job, that of being a mother to her young son, Marcus.
Family was her main goal and ambition because she always felt that family should come first. She met someone and got involved and had a son named Marcus. Marcus's father did not continue on with their relationship, so her and Marcus, that was her life.
She wanted so much for Marcus. She tried to give him the best of schools and best of everything. That was her heart.
A very dedicated mom, a mom who seemed to have had somewhat of a dreaming desire to be the ideal mom in the ideal household with an ideal family.
After landing a promotion, the Department of Defense reassigned Marie to a new job detail, and she and Marcus moved to Los Angeles. Life in LA was good, but Marie felt something was missing.
She wanted that man, that person, that protector in her life. I mean, what woman don't?
In 1993, Marie's wishes finally came true. While working on a government project, Marie met a contractor with an aircraft manufacturer named Andre Jackson. Andre was a former military man and a single parent like Marie.
He was a nice guy. He was very handsome.
They met at work. He asked her out on a date, and things kind of escalated from there. It was very hot, very heated.
Not only did sparks fly between Andre and Marie, but Andre proved to be the ideal role model for her son, Marcus.
How you doing? What do we got going on here? Homework.
Andre really stepped in and took over as dad. Marcus will tell you, he played football with me, he took me to games. He was the dad I wanted.
2 times 1.
2.
Oh, it's that easy, huh?
Here is this great guy with 2 kids, and he's raising them, and here I have a son of my own who needs a father. It seemed like a perfect family for her.
Confident they were soulmates, Marie and Andre wasted little time tying the knot.
She pretty much went to Hawaii and got married and came back and told everybody that they were married.
And Marie had even more good news.
She said, Kelly, girl, I'm pregnant. And I'm like, really? And I was excited for her. She was excited.
We were all pretty surprised, but she seemed to be so happy in her relationship. She welcomed another child, and I knew that they were going to be okay.
She took on that role as a mom, as a dedicated wife, as someone who would put her all into that relationship to try to make it work to the best of her ability.
In March of 1994, Marie and Andre welcomed a beautiful baby boy into the world. They named him Marquise. With good jobs and 4 adoring children, Marie and Andre moved into a spacious new home in Inglewood. For the Jacksons, life in sunny LA couldn't have been more picture perfect.
They worked hard and they loved hard. It was a perfect relationship. You could see the love pouring out of their pores.
But just 8 months later, a dark cloud descended on the Jacksons' shiny, happy life.
When I got home, my wife's car wasn't in the garage.
It starts when Marie unexpectedly goes missing on the evening of November 11th.
She wouldn't leave home and leave those babies. That was a red flag for me. At that point, I knew something was wrong.
And as the hours tick by, the search for Marie will intensify, setting in motion a chain of events that would grow more convoluted and more heartbreaking by the minute. In 1994, Andre Jackson and his beautiful wife Marie were living the good life in LA. Marie was pulling in a steady paycheck with the Department of Defense, and Andre was making big bucks as a defense contractor. With a new home and a new baby, the newlyweds' future seemed bright.
They were one great big happy family, and she was happy with all of that.
But just 8 months after the birth of their son, the Jacksons' picture-perfect life begins to unravel.
Marie.
Andre has returned home to find Marie missing, and neither friends nor family have a clue what's happened.
No one had heard from her, and it was just heartbreaking. I just knew at that point that this was not a good outcome.
Andre contacts the Inglewood Police Department and files a missing persons report. Officers arrive and take charge of the investigation. Their first move is to determine Marie's last known whereabouts. Andre tells detectives he last spoke to Marie shortly before he left to attend his son Andre Jr.'s football game.
She was off from work. It was a holiday. She had went out shopping, just her and some friends.
After Andre Jr.'s football game was over, Andre called home to check on Marie and the baby. But when 8-year-old Marcus answered and explained that Marie wasn't there, Andre raced home in a panic.
When they came home, Marie's car was missing and she was missing, and Marcus, the 8-year-old, was home alone with the baby.
Has she done anything like this before?
No, never. She's a good mom. No, she'd never just run off and leave her kids.
Andre seemed upset. He was emotional.
Please, just help me find her.
Searching the home, detectives can see no signs of foul play. So they turn to 8-year-old Marcus, hoping he can shed some light on this mystery.
How you doing?
Good.
Tell me the last time you seen your mom.
Before I took a nap.
Have you talked to her since?
No.
Unfortunately, he's not much help.
He was watching cartoons. His mom came up and said something to him. He doesn't remember what. And then she left, and he never saw her again.
Do you remember what she was wearing?
No.
With no eyewitnesses and no signs of foul play, what happened to Marie is anybody's guess.
It could have been anything. She could have been kidnapped. She could have been held at gunpoint somewhere, being held for ransom or something. We had no idea.
Detectives issue an APB on Marie's car and begin combing the streets in search of her. The Jacksons' friends and family join in the effort.
Every single girlfriend is calling, looking, searching. They are canvassing the community.
They got together and made a missing person flyer so that anybody that could have seen it could have, got in touch with the police.
We plastered them all over Inglewood. Wherever you turned around, you seen a poster of Marie. On buildings, on store windows.
But after 5 gut-wrenching days, there's still no sign of Marie. That's when Andre decides to expand the search to a nearby state beach.
Andre suggests that they post these flyers at an area of Los Angeles called Dockweiler Beach.
So he essentially goes 1.5 miles away to the gate to Dockweiler Beach.
Andre's decision to canvass the beach proves to be a stroke of genius.
Andre gives a flyer to a young man who's out walking the beach.
If you recognize her and see her, would you let the cops know? Yeah, man.
And lo and behold, when that young man leaves the beach, he sees a car matching the description that's on the missing flyer.
He looked on the flyer and saw the vehicle's license plate right in front of him. So that jogger called the police and said that the husband just gave me the flyer and the car is right here.
Detectives hope that the car will hold some clue about Marie's disappearance. But when they pop open the trunk, they make a startling discovery, one that changes the entire course of the investigation.
It's kind of like these things only happen on television.
Marie and Andre Jackson were living a dream life together.
They were madly in love with each other.
But the couple's world is turned upside down when Marie vanishes into thin air.
I was really concerned, like, where is Marie and what happened?
As detectives search for answers, Andre does his best to be strong for his family.
The kids were very upset, and I think him as a father put on a good front so that he can try to keep his family calm.
My wife is missing.
Andre also does everything he can to help police locate Marie. And while passing out missing persons flyers at a nearby beach, he catches the first big break in the case.
A young man sees a car matching the description that's on the missing flyer. It's Marie's car, the license plate matches, so he contacts the police immediately.
The late model Saab, which appears to belong to Marie Jackson, is now taken to the local tow yard. And of course, it becomes the subject of in-depth investigation.
At first glance, Marie's vehicle seems empty. But when police pry open the car's trunk, they make a gruesome discovery.
Inside the trunk, a horrific sight. The beaten, battered, strangled body of 33-year-old Marie Singleton Jackson. It was a stunner.
I've got a body.
According to the medical examiner, they believe that her death had occurred 3 to 7 days before the discovery of her body.
Once on the scene, the medical examiner quickly pinpoints Marie's cause of death.
This was manual strangulation. Somebody put their hands around her neck and choked her until she was dead.
With the cause of death determined, detectives look for clues about the motive behind Marie's murder.
Her date book and her cell phone and her purse and credit cards and wallet, they're missing.
Maybe she was robbed or maybe she was attacked.
Was it a druggie who looked at her and said, "Hey, good-looking woman with a nice car, must have money"?
Working the robbery theory, detectives decide to monitor Marie's credit card and bank statements for any activity. They must also break the tragic news of Marie's death to her husband. While Andre and the rest of the family struggle to come to grips with Marie's death, detectives receive information that seems to rule out robbery as the motive.
Marie's credit cards were found on an on-ramp in Inglewood.
Now, if this was a theft, a robbery, well, why'd they throw the credit cards away? And at this point, they still hadn't been used.
With the robbery theory seemingly a dead end, detectives take a closer look at Marie's cause of death.
When you're doing an investigation and the victim has died from manual strangulation, it usually says that it was a crime of passion, that the suspect had a connection to the victim.
And nobody had a closer connection to Marie than her new husband, Andre.
The husband is always a potential suspect. Police start investigating, they start asking questions.
When detectives speak with Marie's closest associates, they learn that Andre has been demonstrating some bizarre behavior.
Andre starts contacting Marie's friends. He's giving them excuses, saying that she went out jogging. He also said that she might have been out with one of her ex-boyfriends. He wasn't very consistent in his stories as to the whereabouts of Marie.
For detectives, Andre's behavior raises some potential red flags. They decide to bring him in for a formal interrogation. From the get-go, Andre is adamant he's innocent of any wrongdoing.
He's been out running out all over L.A., tracking down information, and the physical evidence that we've recovered kind of showed some interesting aspects of this case. You know, I forgot to tell my wife.
From the moment he starts interviewing Jackson, the detective is implicating him, is accusing him.
I think he did it, based on witnesses' statements of them. I think he did it. And what I'm trying to find out is why. You are absolutely wrong. I did not kill my wife.
In truth, detectives have zero evidence linking Andre to the crime. And despite his odd behavior, there's no denying that it was Andre's hard work that led to the discovery of Marie's car and her body.
At this point, police believe there really isn't any definitive evidence linking Andre Jackson to the murder of his wife.
They didn't have a connection or a motive between Jackson and the crime.
No sooner have investigators shifted their focus away from Andre than a shocking development cast their victim, Marie Jackson, in an entirely different light. It appears Marie had been keeping a secret from almost everyone. And a mysterious letter is about to blow her cover wide open.
This is one of the most intriguing aspects of the case, one that took investigators into an arena they never imagined.
He thought that this was a conspiracy that was being covered up.
Inglewood resident Marie Singleton Jackson seemed to have it all: a good job, a loving husband, and a brand new baby boy.
She was already a wonderful mother with Marcus, and then she fell in love and welcomed another child. She seemed to be so happy in her relationship.
But in November of 1994, Marie disappeared. And after less than a week of searching, Marie's car and her body were discovered along the highway by Dockweiler Beach.
They found her car and then found her body in a trunk.
At first, detectives believed Marie was the victim of a deadly robbery. But when that scenario is debunked, detectives start to look at her husband, Andre, as a possible suspect. However, with zero evidence linking Andre to the crime, that theory is shelved, and the case slowly grinds to a standstill.
I thought it would be resolved really quickly, and just for nothing to happen, it was very frustrating.
In fact, years would pass before there was another break in the case. It starts when Marie's sister Elaine Roundtree receives a puzzling piece of mail.
We received in the mail a mysterious letter saying that nothing was being done in regards to my sister's murder case, and that her job, that no one should talk about anything regarding the case.
There's no indication who sent the letter, but whoever wrote it suggests Marie's murder is related to her job at the Defense Department.
The letter talked about, there being a conspiracy to cover up her murder, and maybe it was work-related.
It was saying basically she was killed in retaliation for something, or as part of some sort of retaliation for what she'd done.
But what type of work could Marie have been involved in to warrant this type of retribution? By all accounts, she was a clerical worker with little to no access to top-secret information. But could that job have been a cover? Detectives decide to pay a visit to Marie's former supervisor at the DOD. They are shocked to learn that Marie was much more than a secretary.
Well, she did some classified work, some highly sensitive investigative type work for our agency.
Marie was actually employed by the CIA. She had top secret clearance. Nobody knew.
She was a communications clerk who was involved with secret codes.
Suddenly, the investigation into Marie's death has taken on an entirely new dimension.
This could be an international incident. Did someone know that she had access to top secret information? Did someone want to kidnap her to get that information? Now the cops say to themselves, we got to look at it all.
But working the potential espionage angle is no easy task, so police in Inglewood enlist the help of the FBI.
The FBI was involved because she worked for the CIA. And so essentially, it was a murder of a federal agent or federal employee, and so they needed to be involved.
Step one for the feds is to determine the author of the mysterious letter written to Marie's sister.
At first, the author of the letter was a mystery, but later on they found out it was one of her coworkers.
Ms. McCulley?
Yes.
I'm a special agent with the FBI.
With the author of the letter identified, the feds press her for any information she might have regarding Marie's death. But the interview quickly hits a snag.
Well, I didn't mean anything by it.
She backed off and said, oh, I was just venting. I don't really know anything. And it kind of died there.
I just think that someone should be doing more for Marie.
This co-worker simply wanted to light a fire under detectives and to get police working harder. So there was no espionage.
Just like that, the case's most intriguing new lead evaporates, and the investigation into the murder of Marie Singleton Jackson goes cold again.
The first few years is upsetting. I believe everyone was hoping that something was going to be done.
I'm constantly calling, finding out what is going on, how come nothing was happening.
Finally, after nearly 10 long years, a new team of detectives decides to reopen the case.
When the original FBI agents who had kind of overseen it either retired or moved or whatever, another FBI agent went and looked back into it. And so that FBI agent and Inglewood PD reopened the case 2003, 2004.
The new team starts by talking to Marie's now 18-year-old son, Marcus. Marcus was 8 at the time of his mother's murder, but after keeping silent for a decade, he offers investigators a memory from his childhood, one he'd suppressed out of fear.
He talked about that great big argument that happened before my sister was missing.
According to Marcus, this argument took place 6 weeks before his mother went missing.
He grabbed her on the hand of the throat and then fell in the bed, and that's when she moved her off. He slammed the door and locked it.
Detectives press Marcus for the identity of the man his mother was arguing with. Marcus claims it was his stepfather, Andre.
Miss Jackson came running out of the room and told Marcus to call the police, to call 911, that Mr. Jackson was abusing her. Mr. Jackson came out of the room and said, "No, do not call 911.
Marcus explains that shortly after this heated exchange, Marie and Andre made a startling announcement.
It was a family meeting that my sister had had with all of the children as well as with Andre, saying that they were going to be getting separated and moving into some separate living arrangements.
Marcus also informs detectives that shortly after his mother's disappearance, his stepfather instructed him not to mention either the argument or this family meeting to police.
Marcus was totally reluctant the whole time. He held Andre to a high regard and thought that he, was like a dad to him. But at that point, then I think that Marcus realized that this was very serious and that he had to tell the truth and be honest about it.
Marcus's confession skyrockets Andre Jackson back to the top of the suspect list. But investigators still need some concrete physical evidence in order to connect Andre to Marie's murder.
I think that what they wanted was a concrete, undeniable, hard, factual case, and they didn't have that.
Detectives decide to pore over the evidence file once again. In doing so, they make a game-changing discovery.
Investigators notice that there's a drop of blood on the hood of her car. There are also scrapings under Marie's fingernails. This evidence is very, very critical.
Why hasn't that DNA evidence ever been tested? This case happens in 1994, and DNA testing, it's around, but it's not used as prevalent as it is used today.
DNA testing was still in its infancy. Testing is also very, very expensive. Police departments are overloaded.
Can I get someone from forensics to do a suspect reference collection on the Marie Singleton case, please?
Detectives send the DNA to their crime lab for analysis. But in order to link the evidence to their new prime suspect, they'll need a cross sample from Andre himself. There's just one problem with that plan.
14 years later, when 2008 rolled around, they didn't know where Andre was. He wasn't living here in Southern California anymore.
But there is someone's DNA they do have access to. Andre's son, Andre Jr.
What they want is something called a familial hit. What that means is that the evidence they have compared to Andre Jr. is close enough.
But will Andre Jr. willingly offer up a DNA sample, knowing it could put his father behind bars? It's now been more than a decade since Marie Singleton Jackson was found strangled to death inside the trunk of her car. After several dead ends, investigators have reason to believe that Marie's husband, Andre, might be behind the crime.
They saw a man with the means, the motive, the opportunity, a man who said, "My wife's gonna leave me? I don't think so."
But before detectives can make an arrest, they need to tie DNA evidence from the crime scene to their suspect. With Andre's whereabouts unknown, their only hope is to collect DNA from Andre's son, Andre Jr. But will Andre Jr. agree to provide a sample?
They didn't really have to find him because Andre Jr. had been arrested on an unrelated event in another town. But hey, while we've got him in custody, let's do some DNA.
A week later, detectives received the results of Andre Jr.'s DNA test.
When they tested his son against the DNA evidence that was found at the scene, it came back as a familial hit, which means that the son's genes and the father's genes are the same, which means Andre Jackson was probably involved in this crime.
Investigators are convinced the person who killed Marie was related to Andre Jr. That would be Andre Sr.
Finally, after 14 years of frustration, investigators are ready to arrest Andre Jackson Sr. for the murder of his wife, Marie.
A warrant was issued, but they didn't know where Andre was. He wasn't living here in Southern California anymore. They found him in Arizona. And 14 years later or so, they come and arrest him. So he was pretty shocked by that, I think.
For Marie's friends and family, Andre's arrest stirs up mixed emotions.
This was the last thing Marcus wanted to do. Can you imagine? This was his stepfather, but a man he loved, and a man he really didn't want to believe had killed his mother.
We were very glad that this was finally done, but it was also the beginning because we knew that this would eventually have to go to trial and they would have to prove it.
It would take 4 more years for the case to make its way through the courts. On February 17, 2012, 18 years after Marie's body was discovered, Andre Jackson is led into a Los Angeles County courtroom to stand trial for her murder. The prosecution begins its case by outlining Andre's motive for wanting his wife dead. After a whirlwind courtship and spur-of-the-moment marriage in Hawaii, Marie realized Andre wasn't the kind-hearted man he pretended to be.
Clearly there was trouble in paradise. Clearly this was not a happy scenario.
According to prosecutors, after tying the knot, the couple's arguments grew increasingly heated. Marie eventually approached Andre about the possibility of separating, but Andre wouldn't hear of it.
The last thing that you want to do is to see your marriage fall apart. You lose your family, you lose your home, you lose your financial stability, and you have to start over from scratch.
Every time I turn around, you got something to say.
It's over. I think we rushed into it's over.
Prosecutors assert that on the afternoon of November 11th, 1994, Andre and Marie got into another heated argument.
You know, we can't even go to our son's game
It's over.
without
I don't
you
care what
having
say.
an
I'm
attitude.
done.
And eventually, Andre snapped.
Marie, don't ever put your hands on me. You hear what I'm saying? Ever put your hands on me.
Police believe he strangled her, he beat her, and that it happened in the garage of their condominium.
I don't think Andre's intent was to kill her. I think it was an accident. I think it was an argument that escalated and he probably didn't realize his strength.
Prosecutors say that once Andre realized what he'd done, he moved Marie's body to the trunk of her car, then moved her car to Dockweiler Beach to make her death look like a robbery gone awry. He then headed to son Andre Jr.'s football game, where he made a call to the house to solidify his alibi.
What do you mean she's not there?
Andre Jackson had some real remorse and orchestrated this whole Dockweiler Beach thing because he wants someone to find her body and make sure she gets the respect that she deserves.
To bolster their contention, prosecutors point to 2 key pieces of evidence: the inconsistent stories Andre told friends in the days after Marie's disappearance, and the DNA evidence recovered 14 years after her death.
And all those little pieces put together make for a powerful scenario of guilt.
But Andre's defense team argues the state's case is little more than smoke and mirrors.
The prosecutor tried to argue this is a mountain of evidence, it's overwhelming. To me, it was a pile of garbage.
They begin by attacking the DNA evidence.
Fingernails were not broken, which if you're saying that this DNA that's underneath the fingernails is the result of a clawing struggle, well, that's a problem.
You do normally and typically see a spouse's DNA on a spouse's fingernails, so it was unconvincing circumstantial evidence.
As for the blood found on the hood of Marie's car, the defense has an explanation for that as well.
Maybe he was working, fixing the engine and, cut himself. The DNA doesn't give investigators and prosecutors a slam dunk case.
There's no direct physical evidence linking Andre Jackson to the crime. We only have a series of speculations and assumptions that have been put onto the record and adopted as fact without any verification.
But if Andre didn't murder Marie, then who did? According to the defense, the answer to that question is likely buried in some top secret CIA file.
The reality is that being in law enforcement, especially being in the CIA, that increases your risk exponentially.
Maybe it was work-related and the CIA doesn't want people to know about it.
Given Marie's access to highly classified CIA information, it's a compelling argument. But before the defense rests, they astound everyone in the courtroom by calling a surprise witness to the stand. Andre Jackson himself.
I was in total shock that he took the stand on his behalf. They weren't expecting that.
While Andre admits he and his wife had arguments in the past, he's adamant that on the day Marie disappeared, they never quarreled. Andre also denies he had anything to do with his wife's death.
Did you kill your wife, Marie Jackson?
No, I did not.
Andre's testimony is riveting, and many in the courtroom feel it may be enough to sway the jury towards an acquittal.
He did well. I thought he was convincing and honest.
But before the jury decides Andre's fate, prosecutors will call one final witness to the stand. But will this surprise testimony help put Andre Jackson behind bars or set him free? In Los Angeles County Criminal Court, Andre Jackson is on trial for the murder of his wife, CIA employee Marie Singleton Jackson. Prosecutors have alleged that 18 years ago, this respected family man strangled his wife in a fit of rage after she threatened to divorce him. But the defense has methodically attacked the prosecution's case, not only by disputing the state's circumstantial evidence, but also by allowing Andre to testify on his own behalf.
I thought the only way the jury could find out what kind of man he really was to hear him talk about the case.
However, prosecutors have one more witness they want to call: Marie's son, Marcus Singleton. In a police interview conducted back in 2004, Marcus claimed he witnessed his stepfather violently attack his mother. 6 weeks later, his mother was murdered.
Andre had physically chased my sister around the house, and Marcus saw Andre with his arms around my sister's neck.
This story was so important because the prosecutor thought this proved that Andre Jackson had an inclination for violence. If he had attacked her before, which he did, he could do it again.
But as Marcus's day in court approaches, it appears he has no desire to testify against the man he called Dad.
Here's the man that taught him how to ride a bicycle, that took him swimming, and that was the only dad that he knew.
Prosecutor John Lewin had sweaty hands the day Marcus was supposed to testify. He was afraid maybe he wouldn't even show up.
Marcus does indeed show up, and much to prosecutors' relief, agrees to testify against his stepfather.
We were so proud of him for being there for his mom.
I didn't want to believe that he did it. Then I found out that I'm probably going to have to accept the truth, a truth that I really don't want to have to accept even today, to be honest.
In vivid detail, Marcus recounts the physical abuse his mother suffered at the hands of his stepfather.
He was great. This was his mom. But he didn't let the emotional part of being a son play into it. His voice didn't crack. He didn't get teary-eyed. He answered every question precisely.
The testimony from Marcus is compelling, but is it enough to offset the strong case laid out by the defense?
I definitely prayed that justice was going to finally be done.
On Friday, April 13th, 2012, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returns with its verdict.
The jury convicted Mr. Jackson of murdering his wife and sentenced him 25 years to life.
I was so happy. Tears came to my eyes. He had been free for 14 years, so it was time for him to go and serve. It was that time.
Andre was rather solemn. He was probably very, very surprised, but now he's getting his just due.
Andre is currently held in California's Wasco State Prison. As for Marie Singleton Jackson, 2 decades may have passed since her death, but her legacy is alive and well.
I don't know why her life had to go as early as it did, but when I look back and see the family that she touched and the love that she had for the people around her.
I'm so sorry. Ronnie. Who is it? Jackie demanded, her aristocratic facade crumbling into raw rage. Who is the bastard she's been shagging? Don't say it, Ronald pleaded, closing his eyes, a tear escaping his good eye. Mom, leave it. Tell me, Jackie shrieked. It's Duncan Hunter, Jimmy supplied quietly, confirming his own suspicions that had been simmering since his awkward beer with Duncan. Duncan Hunter has been trying to buy Mima's land for years. He couldn't get Mima to sell, so he got close to the family, close to Anna. He thought maybe he could manipulate things from the inside. Duncan Hunter. Jackie looked physically sick. That slimy, mainland opportunist. Jimmy watched the dynamic carefully. If Duncan and Anna were having an affair, and Mima found out, Mima was a fierce protector of her family's honor, even the extended Holdan branch. Mima found out about the affair, didn't she, Anna? Jimmy asked, his voice softening slightly, though relentless. Anna nodded miserably, wiping her face. She saw us. In Lerwick, weeks ago. She threatened to tell Ronnie. She said she was going to regret that. And so was the bastard I'd been shagging. She was going to ruin everything. So you went to see her that night? Tosh asked, speaking up for the first time. Yes, Anna cried. I went to beg her not to tell Ronnie. I went to the croft at 10 o'clock, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was a disgrace. I left. I swear to God. I left her alive. I just walked the hills for an hour, crying, before I caught the late ferry back. And Duncan? Jimmy asked. Did Duncan know Mima was going to expose you? Anna hesitated. A fatal second of silence. I told him. Jimmy straightened up. Duncan Hunter, the man who sat in his living room, drinking his beer, making small talk with his daughter Cassie. Ronald had nothing to do with it. Anna sobbed, looking at her broken husband. He found out about the affair that night at the pub. That's why he got drunk. That's why he was wandering the docks. He didn't kill his Annie. Jimmy looked at Ronald. The big man was weeping silently, stripped of his pride. Ronald hadn't been attacked by a vigilante. He had been beaten by someone he confronted. Maybe Duncan himself, or someone Duncan hired to keep Ronald quiet after the affair was exposed. Tosh, Jimmy said, turning on his heel, we need to find Duncan Hunter. Now, Chapter 16, The Galley Burns. By the time Jimmy and Tosh reached the Lerwick Esplanade, night had fully fallen, and the town was transformed into a vision from a chaotic, ancient past. It was up Hellier. The streetlights had been switched off, plunging the town into darkness, only to be violently illuminated by the light of 1,000 burning torches. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a visceral, primal sound that vibrated in the chest. At the center of the procession was the Jarl squad, heavily bearded men dressed in elaborate Viking armor, carrying gleaming axes and shields. They marched beside a magnificent, full-sized replica of a Norse longship, the dragon head at its prow casting long, dancing shadows against the stone buildings. The air was thick with the smell of paraffin and burning pitch. Sparks drifted into the freezing night sky like angry fireflies. How are we supposed to find anyone in this? Tosh yelled over the roar of the crowd, clutching her coat collar tight against her throat. He's on the committee. Jimmy shouted back, scanning the sea of faces illuminated by the fire. He'll be near the galley. They pushed their way through the throngs of tourists and locals. Everyone was drinking, shouting, completely absorbed in the spectacle. It was the perfect place to hide. It was the perfect place to disappear. As they neared the designated burning site, a large walled park near the center of town, the chanting grew louder. The geyser Jarl stood atop the longship, raising his axe. A thunderous cheer erupted. The torchbearers circled the ship, the flames painting their faces in demonic hues of orange and red. Jimmy's eyes darted across the VIP viewing area. There, standing slightly apart from the crowd, wearing a heavy overcoat over an expensive suit, was Duncan Hunter. He was watching the ship with a cold, detached expression. "Duncan!" Jimmy roared, shoving his way past a group of teenagers dressed as penguins. Duncan turned, spotting Jimmy. For a second, a flash of genuine panic crossed his handsome face. Then he turned and bolted into the crowd, moving away from the fire and into the dark, narrow alleyways of Lerwick's old town. "Police! Move!" Jimmy yelled, drawing his baton and sprinting after him. Tosh was right on his heels. The alleys were a labyrinth of wet cobblestones and blind corners. The sound of the festival faded slightly, replaced by the harsh, echoing slap of their boots on the stone. "Duncan, stop!" Jimmy bellowed, turning a corner into a narrow close. He saw Duncan's shadow dart into a doorway at the end of the alley. It was the back entrance to the old fish market, a derelict building waiting to be demolished for luxury flats, Duncan's own project. Jimmy kicked the heavy wooden door open. The inside of the market smelled of centuries of salt, fish guts, and rot. The only light came from the faint ambient glow of the festival fire filtering through the grimy skylights. "It's over, Duncan," Jimmy said, stepping into the cavernous space, his flashlight cutting a stark white beam through the gloom. "Anna told us everything about the affair, about Mima finding out." Silence, then a rustle of movement near the old ice vats. "I didn't kill her, Jimmy," Duncan's voice echoed, sounding hollow and scared. "I swear on Cassie's life, I didn't shoot Mima. You had the motive." Jimmy walked slowly forward, tracking the voice. She was going to ruin your relationship with Anna. And more importantly, she was never going to sell you that land. But if she died, it went to Joseph. And Joseph is a lot easier to persuade. It's true, I wanted the land. Duncan stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, his hands raised in surrender. His designer coat was stained with dirt. And yes, Anna and it was a mistake. We got careless. Mima saw us. She threatened to tell Ronald. So you went to Bresse to silence her. No, Duncan insisted, his eyes wide. I went to see her. Yes, to offer her money, to buy her silence. But when I got to the croft, she was already dead. Jimmy, the door was blasted open. I panicked. If I was found there with my motive, I'd be locked up forever. So I ran. And Hattie James, Tosh asked, stepping out from behind Jimmy, her own flashlight trained on Duncan. Did you run from her too? Duncan looked genuinely confused. Hattie, the student, what about her? She was murdered this afternoon. On the moors, Jimmy said, watching Duncan's face for any micro-expression of guilt. Duncan staggered back, hitting the pillar. Murdered. Oh my God. No. Jimmy, I've been in Lerwick all day, setting up the festival barriers. I have 50 witnesses who can place me at the Esplanade since noon. Jimmy knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that Duncan was telling the truth. The shock was too raw. Duncan was a sleazy businessman and an adulterer, but he wasn't a cold-blooded killer running through peat bogs with a hunting knife. Who beat up Ronald? Jimmy demanded. Duncan swallowed hard. I did. He came at me at the docks. He was drunk, swinging wildly. He knew about Anna. I hit him with a pipe I found on the ground to defend myself. I left him there. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I'm so sorry. Jimmy lowered his flashlight. The pieces didn't fit. If Duncan didn't kill Mima, and he didn't kill Hattie, then who did? Suddenly, from outside, the night was shattered by a massive, booming explosion of sound. The crowd at the park had thrown their torches into the galley. Through the grimy skylights of the fish market, the sky turned a brilliant, violent orange. The fire had begun, and in that flash of blinding light, Jimmy's mind finally connected the disjointed fragments of the puzzle. Mima Wilson, the skull of Pearl Lundstedt, the missing journal detailing a traitor, Hattie James murdered with a knife to keep her quiet. It wasn't about the land. It wasn't about the affair. Those were just convenient distractions. It was about the past. Oh, God, Jimmy whispered, the blood running cold in his veins. Sir, Tosh asked, alarmed by the look on his face. The traitor, Jimmy said, his voice barely audible over the roaring fire outside. The one who sold out the Shetland bus. Per Lundstedt found out who it was, and he wrote it in his journal. And Mima knew, Tosh realized, she kept the secret to protect someone. Not someone, Jimmy corrected, turning to run back toward the door. Family. But Andrew Holdan is in a wheelchair, Tosh argued, chasing after him. He couldn't have killed them. No, Jimmy shouted, bursting out into the alleyway, sprinting toward his car. But his grandson could. A grandson who would do anything to protect his family's name and their fortune. A grandson who was a police officer who had access to the crime scene, who knew exactly how to contaminate evidence, and who had a shotgun license. Tosh stopped dead in her tracks. Sandy. Chapter 17, The Sins of the Fathers. The drive to the Wilson house in Lerwick was a blur of adrenaline and dread. Jimmy pushed the engine of his Ford Focus to the limit, weaving dangerously through the festival traffic. Sandy Wilson, the quiet, eager to please detective constable, the boy who had thrown up outside his grandmother's croft. It had been a perfect performance. I told my dad not to come down. I was worried about contamination. Sandy had been alone at the croft for over an hour before Jimmy arrived. He hadn't just discovered the body, he had orchestrated the scene. I used a pen to push the jack. She didn't have anything to steal. He had unplugged the phone so Mima couldn't call for help as she lay dying. And Hattie, Sandy had been off duty today. He had known about the dig, known about the documents had he found. He had gone up there, taken Berglund's knife from the empty tent, and hunted her down in the bog to retrieve the journal that named his great-grandfather as a Nazi collaborator. Jimmy slammed the brakes, skidding to a halt outside Joseph Wilson's neat, terraced house. The front door was ajar. Jimmy drew his baton, signaling for Tosh to take the back. He moved silently up the path, stepping through the open door into the hallway. The house was dark, but a faint light spilled from the living room. Jimmy edged closer. He heard the sound of sobbing. He stepped into the doorway, his baton raised. Joseph Wilson was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, crying silently. On the coffee table in front of him lay a heavy, leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle. Per Lundstedt's journal. Standing by the window, looking out at the distant glow of the Up-Hellier fire, was Sandy. He was holding his service radio in one hand and a heavy iron poker from the fireplace in the other. He turned as Jimmy entered. His young face was unrecognizable, twisted by grief, desperation, and a terrifying, cold resolve. Sandy, Jimmy said, his voice surprisingly calm, put it down. You figured it out, then, sir? Sandy asked, his voice cracking. He sounded like a frightened child. I knew you would. You're too smart. I know about the journal. Sandy, I know what Andrew Holdan did during the war. Joseph let out a broken wail from the sofa. He sold them out. Jimmy, my grandfather, he sold out the Norwegian boys for German gold to build his fishing fleet. Nima knew. She caught him burying the body. She kept quiet to protect the family name, to protect me. And when the dig started, Sandy continued, his knuckles white around the iron poker. She panicked. She told me she was going to confess. She was going to ruin everything. The whole damn empire. Our name. Everyone would know we were the descendants of a traitor. So you shot your own grandmother? Jimmy asked, repulsed. I had to. Sandy screamed, tears streaming down his face. I had to protect us. She was old. She had lived her life. But if that journal got out, the Haldanes would lose everything. They'd take the boats, the money, the respect. And Hattie? Sandy shuddered, closing his eyes. She saw the journal in the tent. She read the names. I didn't want to hurt her, Inspector. I swear. But she ran. I chased her. And I had the knife. I just couldn't let her tell. It's over, Sandy, Jimmy said softly, taking a step forward. You're a police officer. You know how this ends. Put the poker down. Sandy looked at the iron bar in his hand, then out the window at the roaring fire illuminating the Shetland sky. The Viking galley was burning to ash, taking its secrets with it. I wanted to be a good detective, sir, Sandy whispered, a sad, broken smile touching his lips. I really did. He raised the iron poker, not at Jimmy, but swinging it wildly toward his own head. No! Jimmy lunged forward, tackling the young officer to the floor. The poker crashed into the coffee table, splintering the wood. They wrestled on the carpet, Sandy fighting with the manic strength of a doomed man, but Jimmy was older, heavier, and fueled by righteous anger. He pinned Sandy down, wrenching his arms behind his back and snapping the handcuffs shut with a brutal click. Sandy collapsed against the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Joseph Wilson sat on the sofa, frozen in horror, watching his son a murderer twice over being read his rights. Tosh burst through the back door, breathing heavily, assessing the scene in a split second. Call for a transport, Jimmy ordered, hauling Sandy to his feet. He looked at the young man, feeling no triumph, only a profound, crushing sorrow for the island that had bred such dark loyalty. Yes, sir, Tosh said quietly, reaching for her radio. As they walked Sandy out of the house and into the freezing Shetland night, the wind howled off the North Sea, carrying the scent of salt, ancient ice, and the bitter ashes of the burning galley. The secrets of Bressay had finally been unearthed, but the scars they left behind would take generations to heal. End of part 2. The architecture of masks. Prologue. The cost of a coat. The human face is the most elaborate lie ever constructed. We spend our lives curated by expectations, dressing ourselves in the fabrics of our professions, our marriages, and our social standing. But for some, the mask isn't a social necessity, it is the entire self. In the late afternoon light of Orange County, 1979, the sun didn't just shine, it glared. It bounced off the chrome of luxury cars and the glass of medical plazas, promising a version of the American dream that was as sterile as a surgical suite. Inside one of these suites, a man adjusted his stethoscope. He looked like a doctor. He spoke like a doctor. He even smelled of antiseptic and authority. But Gerald Barnbaum knew that if you peel back enough layers of a mask, eventually you find nothing but the cold, hard vacuum of a man who never existed. Chapter 1, The Clinic of Silence. Rick D'Alessandro was a man who believed in the tangible. He believed in blood pressure readings, the steady rhythm of a healthy heart, and the clear, unambiguous data of a lab report. As a physician's assistant, his job was to be the bridge between the patient's suffering and the doctor's wisdom. In 1979, that wisdom supposedly resided in Dr. Gerald Barnes. He was a charming man. Rick would later recall, his voice carrying the weight of a decade's worth of hindsight. A little guy, but he filled a room. He had that bedside manner they don't teach in school, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. The clinic in Orange County was a hive of activity. Dr. Barnes was the director, a position of prestige that he occupied with a natural, almost theatrical grace. He was the doctor's doctor, the man who stayed late, the man who remembered the names of his patients' children. But Rick noticed small things. A hesitation when discussing complex pharmacology. A certain vagueness when the conversation drifted toward the minutiae of medical school rotations. At the time, Rick dismissed it. He's a busy man, he told himself the administrative burden of being a director is heavy. Then came the morning of December 26th, the day after Christmas. The world was nursing a collective hangover of celebration, and the clinic was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional cough from the waiting room. John Mackenzie walked in, or rather, he shuffled. He was 29 years old, a man in the prime of his life, but he looked like a ghost. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his eyes were sunken, darting around with a frantic, unfocused energy. I'm so thirsty, Rick, John whispered. His voice was raspy, as if his throat were lined with sand. I drink, and it just goes through me. I'm dizzy. The room won't stay still. Rick performed the intake. Extreme weight loss, polyuria, polydipsia, the classic triad. To a trained eye, the red flags were waving violently. He ushered John into the exam room where Dr. Barnes waited. Dizziness, A. The doctor said, his voice a soothing baritone. He patted John on the shoulder. Probably just a touch of vertigo. A little inner ear imbalance. It's been a stressful season. John, we'll get you fixed up. Rick watched as Barnes scribbled a prescription for an anti-vertigo medication. No immediate finger stick for blood sugar. No urgent hospitalization. Just a slip of paper and a see you next week. Doctor, shouldn't we? Rick started. We've ordered the blood tests. Rick, Barnes interrupted, flashing a bright, practiced smile. The lab will have them by tomorrow. Let the man go home and rest. It's the holidays. John Mackenzie left the clinic clutching a prescription that was effectively a death warrant. He walked out into the California sun, his body screaming for insulin, his blood turning into a thick, syrupy poison. Chapter 2. The weight of 1,200. The next day, the clinic felt different. The air was heavy. Dr. Barnes had the day off a reward for his hard work during the holiday rush. The lab results arrived in a manila envelope. Rick opened it, his heart skipping a beat as he scanned the numbers. He looked for the glucose line. He expected to see a high number, perhaps 200 or 300. The number on the page was 1,200. In the medical world, a blood sugar of 1,200 isn't just a high reading. It is an emergency of the highest order. It is the threshold of a diabetic coma. It is the body's internal systems failing in real time. My God, Rick whispered. He didn't wait. He didn't call the director. He grabbed the phone and started dialing. He called John's home, no answer. He called John's ex-wife. His emergency contacts, nothing. A cold dread began to pool in Rick's stomach. I need a wellness check for John Mackenzie, Rick told the dispatcher at the Garden Grove Police Department. This is a medical emergency. He could be dead or dying. The police arrived at John's apartment an hour later. The silence behind the door was absolute. When they kicked it in, they found him in the kitchen. He was lying on the linoleum, his hand outstretched toward a glass of water he never reached. In his other hand was the prescription for the vertigo pills, the useless scraps of paper given to him by a man of science. John Mackenzie was dead. He was 29 years old. He left behind a 4-year-old daughter named Jill, who would spend the rest of her life wondering why her father never came home from the doctor. Chapter 3, The Actors Resume. Grief is a powerful catalyst. For Rick D'Alessandro, the grief for John Mackenzie quickly curdled into a sharp, piercing suspicion. How could a medical director miss a 1,200 blood sugar? How could a man with a medical degree treat a dying diabetic with vertigo pills? Rick sat in his office, the clinic now feeling like a house of mirrors. He picked up the phone and called the medical board in Sacramento. I'd like to verify the credentials of Dr. Gerald Barnes, he said. One moment, the clerk replied. We have a Gerald Barnes, orthopedic surgeon, practicing in Stockton. Stockton. Rick frowned. That's 400 miles away. This Dr. Barnes is a GP in Orange County. Would you like us to fax his identification photo? When the fax machine began to work and spit out the grainy image, Rick felt the world tilt. The man in the photo was older, with different features, a different jawline. It was a face he had never seen in his life. The man he had been working for, the man who had just treated John Mackenzie, was not Gerald Barnes. The investigation that followed unraveled a lie of staggering proportions. The man at the clinic was actually Gerald Barnbaum, a former pharmacist from Chicago. Barnbaum wasn't a doctor. He was a failed actor and a convicted fraudster who had been caught in a Medicaid scam years earlier, when his pharmacy license was revoked. Barnbaum didn't reflect or repent. He simply decided to play a bigger role. He moved to California, changed a few letters of his name, and borrowed the identity of a real doctor. He had called the medical board, claimed he lost his license, and they, without a single background check, sent him a duplicate. He had spent years seeing 30 to 40 patients a day. He had diagnosed illnesses, performed exams, and prescribed narcotics. He had lived a life of prestige, earning a high salary and the respect of his community, all while operating on the medical knowledge of a high school student and a few years of pharmacy school. He was an actor, investigator Eddie Banks would later say, and the clinic was his stage. Every patient was an audience member, and his performance was so good that even the experts didn't look behind the curtain. On August 8, 1980, the curtain finally fell. Gerald Barnbaum was arrested. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a likable little guy who had made a mistake. But the state of California didn't see a mistake. They saw manslaughter. Chapter 4, The Interstate Shadow. While Gerald Barnbaum was beginning his first prison stint several states away, another man was discovering the thrill of the mask. David Brinkle did not look like a bank robber. He was impeccably dressed, often in custom-tailored suits that suggested a man of significant means. He was an entrepreneur, a consultant, a visionary. In the small, close-knit town of Bloomington, Indiana, he was the kind of man people wanted to be around. Phil Sperry, a local businessman, was one of them. He was smooth Phil remembered. He had an answer for everything. He rented an office from us, claimed he was starting an architectural and construction firm called ACR. He talked about big projects, city planning, the future. But David Brankel's future wasn't built on blueprints and bricks. It was built on the interstate. Brankel lived a life of compartmentalized geography. In one town, he was the devoted father and husband. In another, he was the dashing boyfriend to a waitress named Donna. And on the highways that connected them, he was the interstate bankmart bandit. His method was a masterpiece of efficiency. He didn't hit the massive, high-security banks in city centers. He targeted the small branches inside grocery stores and bankmarts. They were usually staffed by younger, less experienced tellers. They were located near major highway on-ramps. He would walk in, often wearing a fishing hat or a simple pair of tan coveralls. He didn't shout. He didn't wave a gun. He would slide a note across the counter. I have a gun. Be quiet. Go home alive. He would be in and out in less than 90 seconds. By the time the police were dispatched, Brankel would be back on the I-65 or the I-70, his black BMW cruising at the speed limit, the stolen cash tucked away in a designer briefcase. I think the guy I'm looking for is doing the exact same thing I'm doing. Detective Larry Duncan would later muse. Duncan was the man tasked with catching him. I was sitting at my computer, looking at maps of grocery stores near interstates. And on the other side of the screen, in some hotel room or rented office, David Brankel was doing the same thing. It was a game of digital chess played across state lines. Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee. Brankel was a ghost who left no fingerprints and no trail except for the pattern of his robberies. Chapter 5, The Two-Way Mirror. By the mid-90s, Gerald Barnbaum was out of prison. He had served his time for the death of John Mackenzie, but the prison walls hadn't changed him. They had only refined his craft. While incarcerated, he had taken medical correspondence courses. He had studied the language of healing so he could more effectively poison the truth. He stepped out of the prison gates and immediately stepped back into a lab coat. This time, he found Lisa Roberts. He was the perfect husband, Lisa said, her voice trembling with the ghost of a memory. Flowers, dinners, concerts. He swept me off my feet. He was Dr. Gerald Barnes, the medical director of a high-end clinic in Los Angeles. He made 6 figures. We were going to have children. We were going to build a life. For over a year, Lisa shared a bed with a man whose name she didn't know. She watched him leave for work every morning, his stethoscope draped around his neck like a badge of honor. She attended company functions where other doctors sought his advice. Even the FBI used his clinic for their agent physicals. Think of the irony. 100 FBI agents trained to spot deception, stripped down to their underwear, and let an imposter listen to their hearts. The mask was perfect until the Christmas party of 1996. Rick D'Alessandro was there. Fate, it seems, has a sense of dark humor. Rick was attending the same industry event. He was checking in at the desk when he saw a man across the room. A likable little guy with a familiar smile. Rick looked at the man's lapel. The name tag read, "Hi, I'm Dr. Barnes." The blood drained from Rick's face. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. He walked over. The music was playing something festive and bright. The air smelled of expensive cologne and champagne. "Hi, Rick," the imposter said, not missing a beat. His voice was as cool as the ice in his drink. "How are you doing?" "Well, Gerald," Rick replied, his voice shaking with fury. "I'm not doing too well, because you're doing the same thing you did in the 70s. You're a fraud." Barnbaum didn't panic. He didn't run. He leaned in, his eyes soft and pleading. "Rick, you don't understand. This is all just a big mistake. I can go home and get the paperwork. I can prove everything. Then go get it," the clinic supervisor said, having overheard the exchange. Barnbaum walked out the door. He didn't go home for paperwork. He went into the night, disappearing into the neon labyrinth of Los Angeles. But the FBI was no longer his patient. They were his hunters. Chapter 6, The Art of the Escape. David Brankel was also beginning to feel the heat. It was 2003, and the IBM Task Force, a coalition of detectives from multiple states, was closing in. They had a nickname for him now, IBM. They had a photo of his car, a black BMW. They had a theory about his home base in Indiana. They even had a name for their trap, Operation Intercept. On September 6, 2003, Brankel hit his 35th bank. He walked into a U.S. bank in Louisville, slid his note, and took the cash. The police radio crackled to life. Operation Intercept. Operation Intercept. Detectives flooded the highways. They pulled over every black BMW they saw. They searched trunks, checked IDs, and waited for the bandit to fall into their lap. But David Brankel was smarter than the average thief. He didn't take the interstate. He knew the police would be watching the veins of the city, so he took the back roads, the winding rural paths where the only witnesses were the cornfields and the crows. He slipped through the news, listening to the police scanner in his car, a smug smile on his face. He was listening to us, Detective Duncan said. He was one step ahead because he had no conscience to slow him down. Brankel returned to his safe zone. In Vincennes, he was a consultant for the Logan family, who were building a pet store empire. He sat at their dinner table, played with their children, and took their money for consultation fees. He was God's gift to us, Peggy Logan said, or so we thought. At the same time, Brankel was maintaining his relationship with Donna. She was now his getaway driver. They were the modern Bonnie and Clyde, fueled by a mixture of narcissism and high-octane gasoline. My mother said I couldn't even mow the lawn right. Brankel told Donna during one of their long drives. But look at me now. I'm the most successful bank robber in history. He wasn't robbing for the money anymore. He was robbing to prove that the mask was realer than the man. Chapter 7, The Collapse. The end of a lie is rarely a grand explosion. It is usually a series of small, pathetic cracks. For Gerald Barnbaum, the crack was a bus ticket. After being caught again in 1996, he had been sentenced to 12.5 years. But in 2000, while being transferred between facilities, the system made a fatal error. Because he was a low-security inmate, a nonviolent fraudster in their eyes, they gave him a bus ticket and told him to report to a prison in Illinois. He didn't go to Illinois. He went back to the only life he knew. He ended up in a North Hollywood clinic, wearing a white coat and a stethoscope, seeing patients under the name Gerald Barnes. When U.S. Marshals finally tracked him down, they walked into the clinic and called out his real name, Gerald Barnbaum. The man in the white coat turned around. He didn't fight. He didn't try to explain. He just looked at the handcuffs and sighed. "You guys are good," he said. For David Brankel, the end came on a cold December day in 2003. He was driving his BMW in Bloomington when he nearly hit a car driven by an off-duty detective named Kevin Hill. It was a routine traffic stop that turned into a 100-mile-an-hour chase. Brankel disregarded stop signs, drove into oncoming traffic, and eventually left the police in the dust. But he had dropped his driver's license. The police went to his home in Vincennes. They found him trying to flee with his son in the car. He abandoned the vehicle and ran on foot, a small knife in his pocket, tripping over a curb in a maze of apartment buildings. When the handcuffs clicked shut, the entrepreneur was gone. The consultant was gone. All that was left was a tired, 46-year-old man who had robbed 43 banks and had nothing to show for it but a suitcase full of disguises. Epilogue: the empty room. In the end, what remains of a man who spent his life being someone else? Gerald Barnbaum is in a federal prison in Minnesota. He is in his 70s now. The real Dr. Gerald Barnes, the orthopedic surgeon from Stockton, still deals with the wreckage of his stolen identity. It's a headache that never goes away, he says. David Brankel is serving 21 years. The Logans and the Sperrys never got their money back. Donna, the Bonnie to his Clyde, received house arrest. The victims aren't just the people who lost money or the families who lost loved ones like John Mackenzie. The victims are the very concepts of trust and truth. We look at the man in the white coat. We look at the businessman in the suit. We want to believe that the clothes make the man. But as Rick D'Alessandro learned in a quiet clinic in 1979, sometimes the clothes are just a costume, and the man underneath is just a ghost, searching for a face that was never his to begin with. Shadows of the Stolen Soul. The Architecture of Deceit. Prologue, The Mirror's Lie. In the quiet, suburban sprawl of late 70s California, identity was a currency that few thought to verify. People were who they said they were. A handshake was a contract, and a white lab coat was an altar. Gerald Barnbaum understood this better than anyone. He didn't just want to be a doctor. He wanted the reverence of being one. He wanted the hush that fell over a room when he entered, the way people leaned in to hear his pronouncements, and the steady, unquestioned flow of authority. He was an actor who had found his ultimate stage, and the patients were an audience who paid with their lives. Miles away, and years later, David Brankel would find a different stage. His was the concrete ribbons of the American interstate system, the fluorescent-lit aisles of grocery store banks, and the desperate adrenaline of a man who believed his own lies. This is the story of two men who refused to be themselves, and the trail of broken lives they left in their wake. Part 1, The Cost of a Coat. Chapter 1, The Performance Begins. The Pacific Southwest Medical Group in Orange County smelled of antiseptic and misplaced trust. It was 1978, and the sun baked the asphalt outside. But inside, the air-conditioned cool offered a sanctuary for the sick. Rick D'Alessandro, a young and earnest physician's assistant, looked up as Dr. Gerald Barnes entered the clinic. Barnes was a likable little guy. as Rick would later recall. He had a quick wit, a disarming smile, and an energy that seemed to say, "I have everything under control." "Good morning, Rick," the doctor chirped, snapping a chart into his clipboard. Another day, another miracle to perform. Rick smiled back, unaware that he was watching a master class in theater. Gerald Barnbaum, the man inside the coat, was a pharmacist from Chicago who had lost his license in a Medicaid scam. But here, under the golden California sun, he was reborn. He had called the medical board, claimed to be a certain Dr. Gerald Barnes from Stockton, and requested a duplicate